Have you ever found yourself lost in thought, imagining a scenario so vividly it felt almost real? Perhaps practicing a difficult conversation in your mind, or replaying a significant moment with different outcomes. It's a common human experience, this mental rehearsal, this intricate dance of imagination. But what if those internal scripts, those detailed imaginations, were not benign daydreams, but pathways to understanding something far darker, something that could aid investigators in solving complex crimes? Welcome. Today we're going to explore a fascinating and at times unsettling concept in the world of criminal psychology: fantasy rehearsal. This isn't about sensationalizing crime, but about understanding a crucial element of the human mind that can drive behavior, and how that understanding becomes a vital tool for those seeking justice. We'll delve into what these mental rehearsals are, why they matter so profoundly to investigators, and some of the key insights and challenges surrounding their study. At its core, fantasy rehearsal refers to the intricate mental and emotional processes an individual might undergo, often involving detailed imaginations or scripts that can precede and influence criminal behavior. Think of it as a blueprint drawn entirely within the mind, a detailed plan, a series of actions, an emotional landscape, all played out before anything physical occurs. For investigators, examining these internal rehearsals offers a unique window into an offender's motivations, their planning, and potentially even their signature, those unique aspects that can link a perpetrator to a series of crimes. Fantasy in this context isn't just idle daydreaming. It's understood as a fundamental driving force behind certain human behaviors, particularly in sex-related homicides. While fantasy plays a significant role in many aspects of human sexuality, it's when these imaginations become deeply entwined with aggression or violence that they take on profound significance for criminal investigation. This concept is also known as imaginal practice, suggesting that mentally rehearsing actions can to some extent yield results similar to real-life practice. For individuals struggling with emotional understanding, aggressive script rehearsal may even serve as a way to regulate intense feelings, a sort of mental pressure valve that can sadly sometimes lead to devastating real-world outcomes. So why is this so critical for investigators? Firstly, it provides invaluable insight into an offender's unique signature and underlying motivations. Imagine a serial offender whose crimes share distinct, unusual characteristics. Often, these characteristics are not random. They are reflections of a deeply ingrained fantasy, a personal script that plays out again and again. Vernon Gabraith's work, for instance, highlights how fantasy rehearsal can be a key indicator, especially in sex crimes, helping link seemingly disparate incidents to a single perpetrator. It allows investigators to move beyond just the act itself and into the why behind it. Secondly, fantasy rehearsal offers crucial insights into pre-offense planning. Before an act is committed, there's often a fantasy or plan that serves as a powerful antecedent. In criminal profiling, understanding this mental blueprint is considered fundamental. What was the offender imagining? What steps did they mentally take? This helps analysts reconstruct the psychological journey that led to the crime.
It's also important to acknowledge the broader perspective, the criminological imagination, building on C. Wright Mill's sociological imagination, encourages us to connect individual crime experiences with larger social structures. This multi-perspectival approach helps us understand that while fantasy rehearsal is an individual mental process, it doesn't occur in a vacuum. It interacts with an individual's life experiences, their social environment, and broader cultural narratives. Now, let's explore some key concepts. As we've noted, fantasy is a powerful driving force, particularly in sex-related crimes. And the concept of imaginal practice is vital. Mentally rehearsing actions can indeed have similar effects to real-life practice. Aggressive scripts, for some, become a means to regulate intense emotions. Research from institutions like Swinburne University delves into this very area, examining how these internal mental exercises can shape behavior. A critical distinction for investigators, however, is differentiating between mere fantasy and genuine intent to commit a crime. This is where the work of researchers like Michael Seto comes in. Online activity, for example, can indicate whether an offender is primarily fantasy-driven, seeking online gratification, or contact-driven, meaning their aim is to translate fantasy into real-life interactions. Sometimes pre-offense practice behaviors, like stalking, can also be observed, acting as a bridge between the mental script and the physical act. It might surprise you to learn that fantasies about violence, including murder, are surprisingly common in the general population. Research by figures like Julia Shaw indicates that these mental rehearsals might even help individuals process and understand behaviors they wish to avoid in reality, acting as a sort of psychological sandbox for dark thoughts, without necessarily leading to action. The presence of a violent fantasy, therefore, doesn't automatically equate to dangerousness. In practical application, documenting a suspect's sexual fantasies through various means, drawings, writings, computer content, journals, is a standard practice in sex crime investigations. This isn't just about collecting evidence, it's about revealing the emotional force behind acted-out behaviors, providing a narrative to the crime that goes beyond just the mechanics of what happened. Finally, it's worth noting Albert Bandura's social learning theory, which challenged the older catharsis hypothesis. The catharsis hypothesis suggested that symbolically enacting aggressive actions might release aggressive urges. Bandura, however, demonstrated that the symbolic enactment of aggression can in fact promote aggressive behaviors, rather than simply releasing them. This has profound implications for understanding how fantasy might reinforce certain thought patterns and behaviors.
Now let's turn to some of the complexities and debates surrounding fantasy rehearsal, because this field is far from settled. One of the most significant controversies revolves around the predictive value of fantasy versus actual dangerousness. Does having violent fantasies consistently predict dangerous criminal behavior? The scientific literature does not report a consistent predictive relationship. This poses considerable challenges for mental health professionals tasked with assessing an individual's duty to warn or protect, knowing when a fantasy might genuinely escalate to a real threat. Another challenge is the reliability and interpretation of fantasy evidence. Fantasy is inherently subjective. Proving a direct causal link between a specific fantasy and a criminal act is incredibly difficult, and ensuring accurate interpretation of complex psychological data is an ongoing challenge. What does a drawing really mean? How do we interpret abstract writings? These are not straightforward questions. Then there are the ethical implications of data collection. When investigators collect materials documenting a suspect's fantasies, be it personal writings, computer content, or online history, significant ethical and legal concerns arise regarding privacy, the scope of search warrants, and civil liberties. Balancing the need for evidence with individual rights is a delicate act. The role of media is also a hotly debated topic. The extent to which media and technology-assisted fantasy rehearsal directly influence real-life aggressive or criminal behaviors is forcefully disputed. Again, this contrasts with the largely contradicted catharsis hypothesis, leaning more towards social learning theory, where exposure might normalize or even promote certain behaviors. Finally, there's a broader debate within criminology itself. Imaginative criminology, advocated by John Frowley, challenges traditional, often bureaucratically guided approaches to criminal justice. It pushes for a broader, more culturally and historically sensitive analysis, asking what constitutes legitimate criminological practice and knowledge. This opens up discussions about the very scope and methodology of studying crime, advocating for a deeper dive into the cultural and subjective dimensions of human experience, including fantasy. While the future outlook in this specific research isn't explicitly detailed, the emergence of imaginative criminology points towards a significant trend. It suggests a future where our understanding of crime will continue to evolve, moving beyond purely legalistic or behavioral approaches to embrace broader contexts, cultural nuances, and historical perspectives. This implies a continued and perhaps expanded focus on the complex internal worlds of individuals, including the profound influence of fantasy in our efforts to understand criminal behavior comprehensively. Ultimately, understanding fantasy rehearsal isn't about pathologizing imagination, but about recognizing its power. It's a testament to the intricate workings of the human mind, a reminder that sometimes the most critical clues to real-world actions are hidden deep within the private theaters of our thoughts. For investigators and for society, unraveling these mental scripts brings us closer to understanding and perhaps preventing future harm.